So are we now to a place where we could just chat about Mop Man and how that
Right
you,
there.
I mean,
We're
we
right there.
walked right up to it, but just,
I
yeah.
walked right in. So I knew
How
I
did
had to
that come
connect it.
about?
Okay, first of all, I knew I couldn't do the doll act anymore, right? What can I do that's ageless so I don't have to think about having to completely change everything every few years? Well, characters, cleaning lady character, that can work anywhere. And it's people associate with that. And it's also it's the idea of a cleaning person is someone you don't really want to pay attention to because you want your place clean. So I like the idea that I could be somebody that would be finally find a place, find love, you know. So I knew that that was a good point for me to start with. Let me kind of go back a little bit. I've always been a little bit worried about being on stages myself. You know, hiding behind a mask was good because I didn't really think that anybody would ever want to look at me. So how was I going to get to a point where I would look okay? Well, I thought if I start as a really homely cleaning lady and I end up like in an evening gown, then I go from really ugly to not so ugly. You know, in other words, I don't have to run out on stage looking really beautiful, and then where do I go from there? I just rather start and then have an evolvement. So the idea was to evolve it. Okay, good. So how do I do that? Part of this whole process was that I was in Las Vegas and I saw a strip act of a woman that she took a coat and put it on her shoulder and kind of improvised a hat. And that side became a man, and the man began to like remove her clothing. So that was two characters. I'm a mime, great. I love body division. And then that's where the fun for me began, is because I really got to use my mime techniques to do that. Then, of course, the magic was my weakest point, and thankfully, I'm married to Mike Caveney, so that helped me there. And I also had other magicians around that were just, you know, the magic world is great. It's great anyway, but when they see someone who's really interested that already has existing skills, I just was very had really good fortune to know a good amount of great people that were willing to work with me on this. I think my big word in performing, coming up with a routine or an act, it needs to be relevant. People need to understand what you're doing and they need to be affected by it emotionally. And if you don't get those two things, you could be the greatest artist in the world, but if you can't make that connection. So I found that if I turned it into a romantic story, and with Mike's suggestion, like a Cinderella story, then that could be something that everybody could relate to. But yeah, there was all these little things that came together, not at once. I had only planned on doing that act for about 3 years, and I'm on my 34th year now. It just kind of it wouldn't leave me, which is nice. I'm grateful, but I really wish that I knew the formula of that. I mean, I know it back thinking. I know the formula. I wish I could think forward because I would love to be able to do more things like that.
You mentioned connecting the dots, which I think is kind of a theme with you.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times we can only connect the dots in retrospect. We're not
You can't,
seeing.
as that, you know, that came from a Steve Jobs speech. That's where I got the term, and that's exactly what he says. You can't form them yourself. So you just have to notice them. You have to every time something happens to you. That I like the word goosebumps here, where you just get this feeling that if that means something to you, then there's a possibility that you can transfer that. If somebody tells me that they saw my act and they got goosebumps, that gives me goosebumps. I mean, it makes me feel really good. So I want to see if I can transfer things that make me feel really good to others. And I think that's been as varied as my theme and my interests have been. My deep interest is to find things that make me feel good, and then me find a way of having other people feel good.